Hello there everybody, my name is Sophie Aldred and I had the enormously great pleasure of playing the character of Ace in Doctor Who. And I would like to just remind you that you are listening to Gallifrey Public Radio. It's not private, it's public. And it means that you, the public, can listen to this Gallifrey Public Radio. And I'm very honoured to be on it and interviewed by it. So I hope you really enjoy the interview with me and all the other amazing stuff that they put out. And thank you for supporting Doctor Who all these years and for all this time, because without you, Doctor Who wouldn't be the show it is today.
This is Gallifrey Public Radio, a weekly podcast dedicated to positive enjoyment of Doctor Who. We travel through classic and new episodes, explore the extended universe, and play a few games from time to time. We do discuss news, content that has been officially released, and the occasional interesting rumor, but we'll warn you before anything considered spoilers comes up.
Welcome to episode 378 of Gallifrey Public Radio, where we know if the jacket, the name, and the stolen identity fits, well, you know the rest. I'm Jay.
I'm Kier.
And I'm Haley. And this week we learn an all-new concern over old dudes wearing cravats and Tosh and Jack get tugged into the rift, rather than dealing with what spills out of it. As the episode title suggests, though, there's a big focus on the captain, just not the one you're thinking of.
Captain Jack Harkness. We are at the penultimate episode of season 1. Took us a little while to get here, but, we got distracted by, a full new season of Doctor Who, so I consider that a fair trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to distract us again, BBC.
Anytime.
By all means.
Yeah, we could use the distractions right now. But yeah, so we always want to make sure that we start these rewatches by getting just a general reaction to a story that we may know well, we may not know well, we may not have seen in quite some time. So, Jay, Captain Jack Harkness, the episode, not the character.
Right. I remember the general premise of this episode, but I lost a lot of the details in memory. It was actually a lot more enjoyable than I thought. Like, I found myself getting emotionally invested in it again. And as soon as it was over, I was like, man, I can't wait for that. I've got the next one!
Very true.
I think I remember this episode more than probably any other in all of Torchwood. And I think it's one of the much better ones of the series.
Just sort of hits on all points as far as...
Yeah, I mean, you get a little bit of Jack backstory, you get a little bit of Jack romance. It's just, I think it's a really good story. There's, crappy Owen stuff, but I'm trying to remember if there's any point at which I like Owen. And I don't know that there is.
Keep looking.
Okay.
This is one of the stories where, Jay, I have to agree with you. I thought I knew it well, and I probably picked up on a lot of the salient points, but there were some aspects of the connection to what emerges to be a two-parter that I had slipped on, because I was remembering more of the mechanics of the time travel back and the attempt to get back to true time, a relative normal time.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot that this was a two-parter.
Right. Yeah. And then you realize, you know what? We never really got any resolution on that dude. So, all right.
Yeah, and then the next time trailer, you're like, oh, that's why.
Right. So, all right. If everybody's ready to peel into this onion a little bit, let's figure out what's going on in this story.
Let's do it.
Sorry about that. Men are a bit lively tonight. It's the last day of OTU tomorrow. Apologize to the gentleman, George. I think it was your fist in his face he didn't like, not your foxtrot.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You barely got me.
Think the lady also deserves an apology?
I'm sorry.
Apology accepted.
Let's get a drink, George. Hey, You a volunteer too?
Yeah. I'm Captain. You go first.
I'm Captain Jack Harkness, 133rd Squadron.
So, Haley, as you said, this is a matter of, the Jack backstory is always something that we're thirsty for because, as Owen likes to scream, we don't know anything about our captain and so on. But I feel like this is, in true Whovian fashion, a matter of we will dole out some answers to you wrapped in a question bun. Mm-hmm. So what do you feel is your trade-off as far as what you learn versus what you now wonder even more about?
I don't know that we as the audience really learned much of anything. We learned where the name Jack Harkness came from, but then you're left wondering, well, who was he before he was Jack Harkness? Mm-hmm. And we don't get that answered.
Well, I mean, so, again, if you're watching this from the standpoint of a Whovian, yeah, there's not much new to be gained from this. If you're watching it as just this show is completely separate, for all of our first time, like this was their introduction, you learn so much because all of a sudden, okay, Jack was in World War II. He actually fought it. That's new information. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that come at you if you've never seen Doctor Who before.
Right.
So either there's time travel involved or, well, he can't die. So maybe he's just lived that entire time or however the case is. And yeah,
we get these little snippets as we have come to both revere, but at the same time, not entirely trust Jack when he shares information with his team and us by proxy, that at least we have the certainty in this that Jack is so shaken from the moment he realizes that he's back in 1941, or is even being given these little glimpses, just when he starts to hear the music and it sort of takes him back in this sort of wistful, looking up at the ceiling kind of moment. We're getting a far more genuine Jack. And that's a little off-putting because it means that everything that we're getting from him is about as close to the truth as he is capable of giving. And that's a foreign thing, right? Mm-hmm. So do you question things when he really starts allegedly bearing his soul to Tosh at a couple different points in this, because she's, credit to her, she is asking questions without being really, really forceful. Mm-hmm. She's doing it sort of phrased as concern.
Yeah, she's not pumping him for information. She's letting him open up.
Right. So that's a really interesting strategy, if it is even a strategy, or maybe it's just happening because of the fact that she is genuinely concerned, and her way of trying to work through it for both of their benefit and peace of mind is allowing him to have this avenue to start to share these things. But when he says things like, I'm a con man, well, in what capacity? At whose behest? You working for yourself? Were you part of something larger? Where did you pick up this very unusual skill set that you have? Kind of thing. So that's a very interesting choice of phrase. Because if you suddenly start looking at Jack that way, Jay, as you said, for people who might have found Torchwood first, of which we know there are quite a few of them, the idea of understanding that he's a con man now says, well, am I supposed to respect him anymore now? Has that now damaged my impression of him? Is he actually a captain of any capacity, or has he just been faking his way through this entire thing? And I've built all of this love and adoration around a character who's really just a trickster.
Yeah, it can throw a lot of questions onto, like, we've respected him up to this point. He's the leader. He's the one who makes the hard calls and for him to say, "Oh, I'm a con man," it's like, okay, wait a minute, everything's getting thrown into question now. Like all those other times have you been faking it this whole time?
Yeah. One of the things that really kind of makes me wonder is the fact that his little moment where he's talking about his experiences as a boy. Mm-hmm. Because that, even if you had the Whovian side of the viewer's knowledge, you still don't have anything that would help you understand where or what altercation or what this is that he's referencing necessarily. Mm-hmm. And this is something where it's coming from such a personal place that I honestly, even if I were sitting across the table from him and knew that he was a consummate liar and or con man, would buy the fact that he was telling a genuine story here. And saying that, he had to go to war, caught across enemy lines, they tortured his best friend, that he was the one who talked him into enlisting. There's all these questions that come up with that, like, what's this all about? Where did you actually get this military training? What war, what enemy, and what are these worst possible creatures that you could imagine that he references? It's left to us to kind of piece that together.
Well, 'cause it remind me of at this point, we haven't seen him return to Doctor Who, correct?
No, this is before that. So you're seeing like the Vote Saxon posters in the background.
Right. I did see that. That was pretty awesome.
Yes. So we haven't even gotten to right. Yeah, we're in the middle. We're just at the upswing of that arc.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's actually at the very end of this season that the crossover happened.
Okay. That would mean that we don't know anything about his past beyond what was in Doctor Who. Even if you had been watching Doctor Who, all of this stuff about him as a boy is brand new information.
Right.
So, because moving forward, we know about the whole Beauchene Peninsula thing and whatnot, but even after that, like, he doesn't talk about what happens between then and when we meet him in 1942.
Right.
But there's a huge gap of space there that we don't know anything about, and this is all that we've got.
And again, it's like one of those things where they're giving you something with one hand and taking it away with another. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I'm also remembering, now that we're starting to get some of these breadcrumbs, that a lot of Jack's backstory is told out of order, and you're also not given a lot of clarification on what order things happen in, because you've got the longevity, you've got time travel. There's a lot of things that really muddle up what happened in Jack's past.
Right. Mm-hmm. And as conditioned as we may be to hearing that sort of thing because of the Doctor, you never know how much of it is just name dropping or some sort of quirky little filler line to say, oh well, the time I spent with Cleopatra, she was nuts. You don't know whether that's what you hear from these sort of characters is meant to be a tee up for something more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's something that a lot of viewers really enjoy because they have to wonder, like, oh, are we ever going to see the other side of this, or what have you? But
sitting here in April of 2020, nope. Sorry about that.
Well, the last little piece that goes in there, because this is something I remember when watching Torchwood for the first time out, wondering when there were going to be overt Doctor references. Like really just either maybe not appearances, but genuine evidence that the Doctor was just there or something. There's the square indentation on the grass where the TARDIS just dematerialized. Kind of that sort of a thing. Right. But when Jack starts saying something like, someone saved my life.
Yeah.
I remember specifically in my head wondering, was that it? Was the Doctor the reason why? Was the Doctor at, quoting fingers, at fault for making Jack the way he is? I mean, that was that's sort of a teaser in that line that I remember my ears shot up when I heard it. So kudos to Catherine Tregenna as the writer in this one for knowing how to kind of puppet master the audience in that regard if they knew the larger picture.
Exactly, yeah. It wasn't something that was like, oh, you only get this if you watch that. It's just for those that had, it was kind of an extra little, ooh, that might have been something, but I don't know for sure.
Was that a thing? I can't tell if it's an Easter egg if it hasn't been painted. It's just an egg.
Right.
So what are some of the aspects of this story outside of the obvious, all of these things lobbed at us with regards to Jack, that are some of the real shining moments, the things that make this episode one that really sticks in our memory, whereas we've lost so much else of season one in the slipstream of our viewing time?
The exchange between Ianto and Owen the whole time is just, I feel like it really kind of helped to highlight the problem that we have with Owen at this moment. And it really did kind of show that Ianto's not just the tea guy anymore. He's really come a long way since we first met him.
Very much so.
I've never liked him more than when he shot Owen.
Exactly. It was that moment at the end of Mass Effect 3 when you... Yeah, no.
I've never loved you more. The aspect of them instigating this whole peacock strut between the two of them is built upon them comparing, oh yeah, well, I feel bad about my girlfriend because this. Oh yeah? Well, seemed like the most unusual start to this skirmish. But I guess...
To his credit, I mean, Ianto kind of figured it out early on and was like, okay, I'm getting a handle on this. Let me help you come to terms with it. And Owen was just like, no, you can't possibly understand. I know you just explained every single aspect of it, but there's no way you could possibly understand.
And of course, it ends with violence. The idea of having to rebuild the Rift manipulator and that plot point or plot element that keeps them busy across a total of about 20 minutes of screen time. Every time we cut back to them, the two of them are at some point in this kerfuffle over reassembling the Rift manipulator. I personally think was one of the more stagnant points of the story. I almost wanted to see that little piece condensed a little bit to make some breathing room for something else. If that...
But wouldn't we have just gotten more of Gwen and Rhys fighting if it wasn't Owen and Ianto?
Well, I did want to have more Gwen screen time, but that's because I felt like she was probably the most marginalized in this particular story when she had the opportunity to be far more of an on-site catalyst for the whole B-list thing present day.
Yeah, she did really get sidelined.
Rather than Owen having to go back.
Yeah, the fact that they had Owen go back and then, like, why was he going to and from? It just, it seemed kind of redundant. But, I mean, it was him finding the little piece for the Rift machine. That was the only reason why he had to be there. There could have been any situation there. It was very obvious, like, we need something for them to do to keep them busy throughout the episode so they can constantly be bickering.
Right.
And it could have been, rebuilding a computer. It could have been traveling somewhere. It could have been anything in the world. So it did seem like it got an inordinate amount of screen time for something that was really kind of inconsequential.
The bickering needed to be there, absolutely. I agree with that. And it had to intensify over the course of every return to them, so you could see them get from the girlfriend argument to the gunshot.
Right.
That old chestnut. But
sounds like a Tuesday to me.
Yeah, right. But I think it could have just been condensed ever so slightly so that we could have devoted a little more time to some of the other plates that were spinning that I felt were a little bit more interesting or had the more potential to be explored.
Owen seemed almost unhinged every time he was speaking. I wish they had reined him in just a little bit, bringing him down to like a 6.
Well, I like the fact that he was at a 10 at the end, but they should have started him out lower. He didn't need to start at an 8.
Right.
Like, have it ramp up along with Ianto. Maybe he's like 2 steps ahead of Ianto the whole time, but they're both kind of ramping up to that point. But it did seem like Owen was just right at the whole time was just ready to throw blows. So, yeah.
Maybe he's still feeling just kind of fighty ever since getting in the ring with the Weevil.
Maybe so. But I mean, if the only complaint that we really have about this is things like we're really kind of nitpicking this at this point.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic story element. I mean, when have we actually had something about Owen in an episode that we have to nitpick?
True. I also sort of see it as if you're going to nitpick an episode like this, it's probably going to be Owen that you're complaining about.
Yeah.
So the last thing to really kind of poke at a little bit here happens to be exactly what you'd said, Haley, that you'd forgotten that this was supposed to be a 2-parter. And coming into this thing and seeing this our creepy little caretaker who you get absolutely no real, not even I wouldn't even say a resolution, but you don't even get a real clarification of the whole rationale behind the manipulations and the setups and the the machinations that have been apparently been set in motion for quite some time. So it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to be asking a big question of how did he get a piece of the rift manipulator?
Right. I think that was first and foremost. I'm like, why is it there? Why, when he's trying to confound the calculations, doesn't get rid of the note?
Yeah. Well, and that's, I was thinking about that, and the piece of the rift manipulator, I don't know, there's all kinds of ways you can hand wave it. It's like, oh, maybe it's just a common piece of tech for something, and what, I don't know. But the way that I kind of figured the equation was like, he realized what, I mean, if he had the piece of the rift manipulator, obviously he's privy to a lot more information than we think he is.
Sure.
So he was probably able to figure out what Tosh was working on there, and realized, oh, they've got it figured out. But if I scratch out this part at the end, it won't close back up once they've gone through.
Well, no, I thought the whole point was if they had the whole equation, they might not need to use the rift manipulator. Like, they might be able to do it some other way.
Right.
But by having, like, 96% of the information, they needed the rift manipulator to get the last little bit over. And his whole goal this whole time was to make them turn that machine on.
Right.
Yeah.
So this has, like, Trickster God written all over it.
Kind of, yeah. I feel like it did kind of work. It was something that was subtle in the background, that there's a sense of like, something's not quite right here, but it didn't overshadow what was really important in this episode, which was the character interactions that we got.
Right. Well, most of our characters.
Well,
Sorry, Gwen. But all in all, I mean, this is one where we had been saying all through our rewatch here that season 1 is this dramatic upward curve, right? On a near exponential curve as far as the engagement. The real kicker is that when you get to a story like this, where I think we can all agree that this was pretty entertaining start to finish, is that it involves elements of some of the things that we groaned at, or at least it references aspects of episodes earlier in the season that we groaned at, like Cyberwoman and things like that. But it's starting to stitch them all together. And
that, I think that was the right way to do it, is that you get the reference to it, hey, this is something that happened, but we're not going to dwell on it. You know, we're trying to tell a complete story, and you may not have liked this chapter in it, but it is part of the story overall. And that was the best way to kind of tie it in and make it, give it some kind of substance posthumously.
Would we consider this to be, to date now, the top-seeded episode of the season?
Yep.
It's hard for me. Countryside always kind of sits high on my list of like season 1 episodes.
Yeah.
But this is the Torchwood that I remember. This is, we're on the track now to be the show that I remember and love.
Right.
So yeah, it is definitely high up there. I don't know if I'd call it number 1, but it is definitely top of the list.
I think that this is the point where, for me, Torchwood became what I thought it originally was intended to be, which was Doctor Who After Dark.
Yeah.
Because it had all of the aspects of a really intense Whovian episode, except they're swearing at each other and talking about, shacking up and all kinds of things.
Right.
Oh, and a lot of occasional gore. But we didn't really... This episode wasn't particularly gory at all, in fact.
No. But that does lead us to the most important question of this entire episode. Do we think Ianto actually was aiming for the shoulder?
There's a lot of nerves if you trace them out on paper, from the brain stem to the index finger. There's like yards and yards of nerves and synapses and stuff in there. A lot of things can happen across that span. Intentions can change. I don't know.
I kind of wonder if he was aiming at all. If it was just like, he just learned how to shoot the gun and he's just trying to hit the target.
I don't know. I'm just kind of like, if I were aiming for the shoulder, I'd probably go for the right one, because like where he shot him in the back, you get kind of close to some very, very vital organs there.
I don't know if Ianto really was aiming for anything. He's very passionate and impulsive, and he gets very, what's a kind way to say this? Punchy when his passions are rising. He might say something really, really personal or profound, or he may freak out and flail and shoot someone. I don't know how much forethought he puts into things when his blood is up.
I don't know. We'll see how his accuracy holds out over the course of the series. But
what would have been really great is if he had the safety on in the moment of all this. Don't click. You dare click.
No, damn it.
Well, I'm going to say that our items for tonight's news are in pairs. Okay,
yeah.
They're coupled off kind of nicely. We got a pair of things that reference one of our favorite people in the Whovian realm today, Mr. Paul Cornell, mm-hmm. and we have a pair of items that reference one of our favorite people of all time within the Whovian realm. So, flip a coin. Do we want to be happy or do we want to be sad first?
Oh, geez. Let's go ahead and talk about Paul Cornell first.
Okay. Well, Paul has been very busy, despite the COVID lockdowns, because there have been a lot of demands on his time to continue to entertain the Doctor Who fandom, as many writers, producers, directors, and creators have been asked to do at the behest of Emily Cook and everything that she's been producing for the Doctor Who lockdown. One of the things that he's now given us to add to the pantheon of writers who have given us some phenomenal short stories to entertain us at any time that we choose is a short story that involves our entire current TARDIS team, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love seeing new writers take a crack at Doctors that they didn't get a chance to write for. Just seeing that voice, that new voice given to them, and this is fantastic. I love Paul Cornell, and he understands Doctors on a way that a lot of people kind of struggle to, I guess. Well, I don't say struggle, but he understands them better than most I've seen.
Mm-hmm. And the short stories, it's wholly entertaining. It's one of those ones where you get a lot of the exchanges between the space fam that we have come to identify and love. He captures their voices perfectly as they're sitting around, playing a game, the game where you've got a famous person's name on a card attached to your forehead kind of thing, and that's wholly entertaining in and of itself. But then it has an aspect of it which Paul had said was his inspiration for approaching this particular story, in wanting to do something specifically with Yaz. And I'll leave it at that and say that it is redeeming and is absolutely worth the read for that aspect alone. But give yourself a little bit of recovery time. That's what I give it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair.
Yep. So the short story is called The Shadow Passes. It's available on the BBC's website. It's out there, and people have been enjoying it thoroughly for a couple of days now, so please be among them. The other thing that is going to be keeping Paul busy is at the tail end of this week as we're recording. So 24th of April, this coming Friday, Paul will be joining director Charles Palmer to do a tweet along, watch along with tweets, tweet with live tweet. It's not really live, but sort of everybody watching at the same time. So in that aspect, you know what I mean. Another one of these for Human Nature and the Family of Blood.
Yeah, this excites me so much because this was such a fantastic two-parter that kind of gets glossed over a lot of times. It happened in series 3 where people tend to kind of be like, oh yeah, that was the series with Martha, and it does get glossed over a lot, but I think this was a standout story.
Oh, this was
and it deserves to get the attention.
Yeah, by all means. I mean, you're dealing with the whole Mr. Smith removal, the memory removal, the fob watch, the family, father mine, and it's so good. And you get Dark Doctor. I mean, there's so much to this to enjoy. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping this has been often the case that in the 24, 48, 72 hours immediately prior to one of these tweet along sort of things, that they suddenly say, oh, surprise, we're adding to the mix. It happened when we did Vincent the Doctor. I'm hoping that there might be a little addition here as well, but follow along. just keep tabs, and, keep your search parameters out there for the hashtag Doctor of Mine, and they'll be running it obviously on Friday the 24th. Obviously, here in North America, please be prepared to do this in the middle of the afternoon because they're going to be doing this, at a evening viewable time in the UK. But this is definitely going to be one that I'm personally setting the time aside for. I have a lot of stuff I got to get to this week, but I'm carving out the time to do this because these are some of my favorite stories from seasons 3 and 4, I would say.
Yeah. No, I will absolutely be there for this one. I cannot wait.
Yeah. All right. We'll do the easier one of this second half, okay?
Yeah.
I will at least preface the fact that Elizabeth Sladen has been on everyone's minds and memories lately because just yesterday, the 19th, was the anniversary of her passing. So, as is very often the case, this is one of those sort of bittersweet occurrences on our Whovian calendar that everyone sort of takes pause. And a lot of times it can be something that sort of brings the community down a bit because we wanted to be able to enjoy both Liz and the Sarah Jane character for as long as we possibly could.
Yeah.
Big Finish has made a decision to utilize the character in an upcoming audio production that we will get at some point next year. It's a 2021 release. They were giving some explanation that they are actually, as we were wondering just a couple of weeks ago, they are still doing some production by doing remote recording, but it is not obviously at the same pace or same capacity as what they had been doing in studio.
Well, it's because they can't convince anybody to come in since they're not getting lunches.
Well, yes, no, cannot share lunches. No. As good as they may be. But they're going to be doing a Return of the Cyberwoman story that will involve Sarah Jane Smith.
But how do they do that?
Well, they do it very carefully by utilizing Elizabeth Sladen's daughter, Sadie Miller. So it's done with all the respect, all the care and concern, and the blessings to be able to do this kind of production. Sadie has worked extensively with Big Finish to date, but this opportunity of having her actually take on her mother's character is just an interesting turn, and I'm very, very eager to hear how this turns out.
I mean, this is kind of one of those things, like right in the vein of Sean Pertwee dressing up as his dad for Halloween, and if you're going to bring the character back, this is the way to do it. And I mean, obviously, this is going to be in Big Finish, so it's you don't need that the similar look or anything like that. But reading the headline and being like Sarah Jane to be recast or something like that, it's like, okay, no, I'm already on edge. And then you read further and it's like, okay, I'm fine. This is okay. This is how you do it.
Right. And they'd had experience doing this very thing with Michael Troughton reading for his father and that sort of thing. So it's not unprecedented by any means. It just happens to be something that's touching upon a character where a lot of people say, "Ooh, you this had better be done well, done respectfully, done with exquisite care."
Yeah.
So, if you needed a greater example of the sort of reverence that Liz Sladen created through her involvement in Doctor Who proper and in the Sarah Jane adventures, we just yesterday were given a story that was then reenacted, or sort of read and reenacted, sort of like a stage reading as far as the way it was done in a video format. Speaking of remote recording, to tell a story that could only be titled Farewell Sarah Jane. It has a lot of appearances from individuals who were fortunate enough to work and interact with her over her career, and is just beautifully done, knowing the circumstances for which it had to be assembled and recorded and produced. And we can thank Emily Cook for that one as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, this was just so heartwarming to read or to watch, and just seeing everyone that took time out of their day, that took the effort to do these things, and just being able to see the impact that Liz Sladen left on everyone with her character, with her portrayal. yeah, it was just one of those things. I mean, as soon as I finished watching it, I sent out the tweet. I'm like, okay, where did all this dust come from, and who is chopping onions?
You're watching along with it as it's just being done as a recording studio read along. You know, we just happened to set a camera up in the sound booth as being recorded, but then you'd have moments where the story cuts to a line from a specific character, and all of a sudden there's Katie Manning. Or there's Anjali Mohindra who played Ronnie on the Sarah Jane Adventures, who has a beautiful, beautiful sequence. Just all these nice little vignettes that just take it to something completely unexpected. You first cue the thing up, and you're expecting another one of these sort of short stories that we've been getting lately that might be read along. So, this should probably take about 5-6 minutes or so, and it pops up, and you're like, this runs 13 minutes. That's unusual. What is this thing? And by about 8 minutes into it, you're broken.
Yeah.
So make that part of your viewing, but again, make sure that you have the capacity to go either stand out on a balcony or take a quick walk or something. Just get some air.
Yeah, it is well worth the time, but it'll get you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Kier made us watch it right before we did the podcast.
Yeah. I always want to make sure you come into these things slightly shattered.
Yeah, hence the reason we had to take 45 minutes extra before we started recording, because we were all a mess.
Very much.
I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
All right, so next week we're going to be getting back to our game rotation, and this one is called the Rumor Mill.
Yeah, this is one of those. All right, I'm in the process of moving, so I'm not sleeping much, and so I get these ideas at like 3 a.m. as I'm painting a bedroom or something, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if? So basic idea, and we'll go into more detail as we tee this up next week when we actually play. I am going to have a whole bank of Doctor Who names, phrases, locations, things like that. Sort of like a Mad Libs assortment of potential responses that will get randomly thrown at one of us to have to assemble an episode synopsis for Series 13. So you might get a couple of characters, a location, a piece of technology, something like that, and a villain, and you have to come up with some sort of an episode synopsis that makes sense. So,
This is gonna go sideways, real quick.
Yeah, because we could also make the decision. I'm debating now whether we should have rounds where we do one for serious, one for not so serious, and one for cover the children's ears. That kind of thing. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I imagine it would be a mixed bag of those if you just told us to make the episodes, depending on, what popped into our crazy minds first.
That's right. Yeah. Left untethered, you're just going to hit all those, tick all those boxes in one shot. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I foresee this prophesied Series 13 being the worst of the entire show.
Stricken from the record.
All right. Well, this has been episode 378 of Gallifrey Public Radio. Until next week, this is Jay saying, I'm going to go watch this again so I can watch Owen get shot.
And this is Kier saying, the next episode is really going to be the interesting one when the rift really gets out of control and Captain Jack meets Captain Jack Sparrow.
And this is Haley saying, next week, Jay becomes his own Gatus. Mark Jadis.
We'll see you guys next week.
LZ.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Gallifrey Public Radio. Want to keep the conversation going? You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or just send us a good old-fashioned email to feedback@gallifreypublicradio.com. You can also give us a phone call at 754-225-5477. That's 754-CALL-GPR, and you may hear your voice on a future episode of the show. Everything's got to end sometime, otherwise nothing would ever get started. Join us next week for a brand new episode.
a penchant. Gallifrey Public Radio is copyright 2020. See you next week.